guys, it's Deborah from North of Somewhere Nomad. Welcome to my channel, guys. So today in this video I am going to talk about being unhoused in a housing crisis, and this is my reality and I live it. I feel like I want to share about that, but not, I really debated on whether I had the capacity to do this video with the intention of just sharing the information and not getting into my personal feelings or my opinions and my viewpoints. So what I decided to do is just remove that, stay away from the why I think this situation is the way it is, and just talk about my reality and how I live it, because I live full-time in my minivan, my Chrysler Town and Country minivan. So I have firsthand experience with this, and that's exactly what I'm going to share, my experience and sort of the things that I experience related to this really complex issue of being unhoused in a housing crisis. So guys, I'm opening up. I'm going to share with you a lot of stuff, and might be triggering for some people, and if it is, just click off. It's all good. But if you want to hear more about my personal experience with being unhoused in a housing crisis, let's go. Okay, let's get into it. There's a lot of information that I want to put in this video. I don't know if it'll all make it, so I'm just gonna talk, and then I'll probably have to chop this up and maybe put things in different order or whatever. So I'm just gonna dive right in, guys. If you're new to my channel, if you just found me because of this subject or whatever, my name is Deborah, and I have been living in a vehicle for the past just over a year, 4.5 months in my Ford Fiesta, and then the past 9-10 months or more in my 2016 Chrysler Town and Country. I'm just going to talk about my life related to the whole situation of being unhoused in a housing crisis. So where I live, or where I'm based, on Vancouver Island in British Columbia in Canada, this housing crisis has exploded, and it's pretty much out of control. And I know it's not just happening in Canada, it's happening all over the world, and it's very serious. And so how it's affected my life, and so I'm just going to tell you guys, keep it real, about my current demographic in relation to who I am and sort of why I'm living in a vehicle. And then I hope I can turn this into some kind of an inspiration or a support or a survival guide or just tips, and because that's my intention here. Is even though this subject is so intense and it's so heated and personal and all that kind of stuff, I want to just keep the rant to a minimum or not at all, and just talk to you guys about the situation I'm in. And there's a lot of different situations. This is a whole thing. There are so many different people in this category of unhoused. So where I live, this is the new thing, right? Being unhoused. And I think it's relevant because, before, I guess, a year or two ago, since this new label has sprung up, it was you are either living in the sticks and bricks or you are homeless. And so, I have never seen myself as homeless. But because, from my point of view, because this situation has exploded where so many people are living in vehicles or sort of alternatives to a sticks and bricks for a lot of reasons, basically related to a housing crisis. So here in Canada, we have an intense housing crisis where I'm not, don't quote me on this, but something like 2 or 3 million homes short of what we need to house everybody who lives in Canada. Yeah, so that's pretty intense. And all a part of this housing crisis is the cost of housing, housing availability, so much stuff. So anyway, a huge portion of the population cannot afford to buy a house regardless of your income, and also can't afford rent or don't want to pay rent because the rent prices are just unbelievably outlandish. And then there's more of my demographic, which is like I'm on a disability pension, so a very limited fixed income. I'll tell you like sort of how I fit into the demographic of things as it relates to housing and why I completely fall through the cracks. I fall through the cracks on every single level, and I know in my demographic I'm not alone. I've been seeing more and more people like me, so women, older women on fixed incomes. It's just like every day I see new and new and new. Okay, so in Canada, I mean, years ago, we used to have an amazing social support system, which has, been dwindling and dwindling. But one of the support systems that we have had in this country is support housing. Like, so what we call here in British Columbia is called BC housing, and basically what that is homes or apartments or whatever that are geared to your income. So if you're on a fixed income like a pension or a disability, they only extract X amount of dollars from your living expenses, right? And then that goes to pay your rent, which is far below market value. And so this particular thing is, so it's called BC housing. And as you can imagine, it's so, it's just the waiting list for this, because of there's just not enough housing. There's not enough housing for people who can buy a house, let alone people who can't even afford rent, right? So just think of that in that relative term. So for this BC housing, the waiting list is probably over 6 years. So I have been on that waiting list since 2021. So what's that? 4.5 years. So that housing, here's how the priority goes, right? And this is just the reality, guys. I'm just saying it how it is. It's not my opinion that this is the reality of it. This is like how they allocate your need or your top priority. I'm just telling you guys cold hard facts, okay? So in terms of housing priority, like right now, the units that are available or that they're building or that are just coming up are and these are the demographics that take priority, and then I'll tell you how I relate to that priority list. Okay, so I don't know if you know, but there's a humongous drug problem in British Columbia, and we have the worst, maybe not the worst, I'm sure that in United States it's worse, but in British Columbia we have, I don't know if you know, the downtown east side. So these tent encampments, right? Because these people have just nowhere to go. And I don't think there's all the homeless people are in these tent encampments. It's, but those are what we see on the news, and it's like, the alarm bell, and these tent encampments are massive. So those fall under the homeless category. And if you're living in anything else than a sticks and bricks, so basically a vehicle, a boat, a trailer, a camper, an RV, that kind of thing, is considered unhoused, where you don't have a street address, right? Okay, so here is the list of priority, and it's not in the order I'm going to say, but these are the demographics that are getting top priority for this low-income housing, which I would qualify for based on my demographics. Okay, so related to the drug problem, so if you, so drug addicts, right, get this huge priority because they're putting together what they call supportive housing. And I don't know if you know, and I'm not going to get into the controversy about it, but they deal with the drug problem by giving drug addicts, like hardcore drug addicts, synthetic government-funded drug, heroin. I don't know if it's heroin or fentanyl. Anyway, it's government's supplied. And so what they do is when, so now these people are on this, rather than a street drug, they're on the government supplied. So they're still completely addicted to the drug. And there's another whole issue about that. But so that demographic will get what they call supportive housing. Basically what that is some kind of housing, and what they're doing is they're taking, like, I don't know, it seems to be like motels or like really, or dilapidated something, and they turn it into supportive housing. And so as a drug addict, you get housing because most of them are on another type of government income, and then so they take the rent from the people and also supply them with the drugs and provide them with meals and all that kind of stuff. So that's supportive housing. But what they've started doing is also putting other demographics into this supportive housing, including seniors or people with mental health issues, not necessarily drug addiction. And so it's really getting complicated. Okay, so there's that. And I think they're trying to create more housing for the different demographics. But right now, that's what's happening. A lot of people are ending up in this supportive housing. The other demographic are single moms with young children, and there's a lot of that. And there always has been. But anyways, obviously, children need to be housed, and so, that would qualify you almost immediately to have housing, which is great. Children need to be housed. Okay, and then another priority demographic are ex-cons. They're building supportive housing type situations for ex-cons. You get out of jail and then you go into a certain kind of housing, right? And so then there's that. And also immigrants. They come into the country, and regardless of their situation, they're housed, right? Immediately. And then there are like abused women. So they are fleeing an abusive situation and need protection. And so there's housing set up, like there's different tier housing for women who are fleeing abuse or some kind of violent situation. And there's, I think, like, a transition house, a shelter, and then they get helped into housing in other areas down the road as they, deal with that situation. And then there are seniors, homes and housing, and a senior in Canada here is 65 and over, and sometimes 60, and even actually sometimes 55, but very rarely. So a senior in Canada is considered 65, and so they have nursing homes and what we used to call old age homes, and even BC housing, dedicated units for seniors 65 and over. Okay, so those are sort of the top priorities. And so here's me in all of that. So just getting back to my personal reality situation is, because I don't qualify for much of that list that I just said to you, and just to recap, so I'm not a drug addict, I'm not an alcoholic, I am not an ex-con, I am not a battered woman fleeing an abusive relationship, I'm not an immigrant, what else? And I am not a senior. So where does that leave me? Uh, it has left me to figure this out myself. And so, um, yeah, so back when I made the decision to live in my car, and all the things that there were obviously a lot of things around that. And so one of them I had to look at was financially. So I'm on this disability pension, which I paid into all my life, right? So, but what they do is they allocate a certain portion of that for rent or housing. And that portion equals $500. So you have to either hope that you win this BC housing lottery, and if you did, they put you where they put you. You just, you go where they say we have a place here, and there you go. And it could be anything, anywhere. You really don't have any say on where you're gonna live. Well, you can also obviously pick the geography, but you're basically placed where they say we have a place, and there you go. And then the government takes that $500 that is allocated for housing. So what I decided to do was, figure out, okay, I have $500 for housing, and here are my options, which obviously are extremely limited. So when I was still living in my car, I decided when I was going to upgrade to the van, and I knew I was going to be getting financing. I didn't have that huge chunk of money. So my van payments equal, like my auto loan is $500 a month. So this is legitimately my home. It's what I pay for. It's mine, and I get to, I've had total control over my environment and how I want it to be. So that's how I dealt with like the financial part, and based on my demographic and all this other stuff that I've just talked about, the likelihood of me qualifying for one of these low rental housing is almost impossible. And so and that's fine, I accept that. I've gone through different stages of how I feel about that, but at this stage I have made the decision of how I'm going to live and with what I can afford and how I make it work. And there are lots of other great resources that I have access to, and I'm very grateful for those resources, and I make this work. And I don't dwell on usually not dwell too much on how I feel about the system and all that kind of, because you can, and I've done it, you go down this rabbit hole that's not pretty and doesn't feel good, and it's just not how I vibe. I would rather just take control of my life based on the situation, based on the resources I have, and I move forward. And that has helped me a lot. So that's what I chose to do. And I'm actually really glad that I made this choice, because this, van life, car life, living in a vehicle, nomadic life is a lifestyle. And so I related to that. So what I am starting to see more and more of, so women in my demographic, I'll just, as I, just not named them all off, I see more and more women, and there's men too, but sticking with my demographic, living in cars, but just like it's really heartbreaking. And it's just, you can see some bags, there's no window covers, it's just so obvious now. And then there's also older couples living in, there's just every demographic you can see. out there exploding. And then so part of what is also happening simultaneously is that, so you're unhoused, right? If you're like, you're living in a vehicle, you're unhoused. And so you need somewhere to park at night, right? And the vehicles range from a tiny little car like what I lived in up to RVs, motorhomes, and that kind of thing. So now what's happening is we have this population of unhoused people living in vehicles, needing to find somewhere to park. And so now what's happening is nobody wants to see all these unhoused people in vehicles. Like, all the cities, at least in my area, you know, on Vancouver Island, are and here's the mind trip about this, okay? This is where I get a little tripped out, is because the city has been dealing with tent encampments for years now. Years. And so, you know, they pop up and they take over, and then there's this huge situation, and the city just kind of like tolerates it, and the citizens of that city tolerate it, and it's just like nobody knows what to do, really. And nobody's doing anything, at least from my vantage point. There's really not a lot being done, and it's kind of becoming the norm. So now there's this new, you know, unhoused thing, and people are parking where they need to park, on side streets, you know. There's a gazillion different ways to park, but a lot of people park on what's called city property. And so anyways, from what I've been seeing is that the cities have been cracking down and just like putting all this pressure on. Nobody wants the unhoused in around them, not even on city property. And there's this area up in this that I have been, I'm not going to say names, it's way out. There's no residential homes around. It's just, you know, it's well known an area for walking, pets and stuff. It's beautiful, but there's a lot of like empty land spaces around there, and a lot of people park their vehicles. And most people who are the unhoused vehicle dwellers follow this code of conduct of, you know, arrive late, leave early. So a lot of these spaces are just being occupied during the nighttime hours. So the city is coming around and knocking on vehicles and like, you can't park here, you can't stay here. And they're also, you know, you see signs everywhere, no overnight parking no overnight sleeping in vehicles. So it's getting specific. No overnight sleeping in vehicles. No overnight parking, just no sleeping. No, they don't want people sleeping in their vehicles. But it's okay to join a tent encampment. And some of these tent encampments, like, they just pitch a tent on a major city street and off you go, right? They just hunker down and take over complete city blocks and create, you know, all kinds of problems in these tent encampments. But parking on a city street out in, you know, the middle of, away from people's homes and all that stuff, are being cracked down on. So it's a situation, and something has to give, because people need somewhere to go. And a lot of the unhoused are in my demographic, right? They're doing this not out of a choice. There are a lot of people who are choosing, you know, to sell their homes, go buy a fancy dancy Sprinter or something, and go traveling and all that kind of stuff. And so there's that. And I think a lot of people just can't afford, right, to everything's gone up. So there's several different demographics within the unhoused. So for my demographic, as a woman, an older woman in a vehicle on a fixed income, we need somewhere to sleep. Okay, so that's the situation. And of course, people are getting very passionate, and you know, like I said, the temperature is rising, rising, rising. For me, when I try not to too much just get involved in that, because it's on both sides, right? It's on both sides. It's on all sides. So what I do is, the majority of the time, not always, I don't do this gracefully, guys. I'm learning how to just take care of myself and kind of stay in my own lane, as it were. So I'm just going to talk to you guys then about how I navigate this and how I'm dealing with it, and how I know there's going to be more and more people in my demographic who are going to deal with this. And I've shared a lot of, like, you know, how to build out a van. I built out my car and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to just kind of also talk about, like, some of the top essentials, right? If because I think what is happening too are a lot of people are being evicted, or reno-evicted, or all these kinds of different situations that are happening. So yeah, from this point, I'm just going to talk about how to, like, a survival guide and how to navigate, like, if you're new, and I'll just share how I've been doing it and how I keep myself safe and all that kind of stuff. And also on that note, I just want to say, like, so what I did is I made the choice, right? And I think that's really important. This is the empowering part, because it can be very disempowering when you're in my demographic. You know, you've got a lot of things working against you, and like I said, I fall through the cracks on almost so many different things that it's just, I've even stopped trying, right? I feel like, here's what I've got, here's what I have to work with, and I'll just do it in this way, and it feels great for me. It's hard, but at least when I wake up, I don't feel like a victim. I don't feel like I'm down and out. I don't feel homeless. I feel like this is a lifestyle choice I made based on my circumstances, based on the reality of my situation, and that's what helps me a lot. And I know who I am, right? And this is a really, really important factor, is to know who you are eternally, because it's very easy to let a lot of these labels and situations and to really affect your psyche. And so here's probably the most important piece of advice, and it's in my belief system, is know who you are, and be that, and live that, and externalize that always, because that will be what propels you into a better, like, it's a kind of a manifestation. I know that's cliche, but this is how I have manifested. So when and I'll share this with you, when I first started, I moved into my Ford Fiesta, this tiny little, a Ford Fiesta, this tiny little vehicle, a hatchback. But prior to even any of this housing crisis starting, I just romanticized van life and nomadic life and having, that whole thing. And a lot of what had been on YouTube prior to, even 5 years ago, I guess, was like, this glamorous life, and you only saw beautifully built out vans and on ocean, and all the gadgets and beautiful people doing it, and that has quickly is not the norm. So anyways, I had romanticized this lifestyle for a long, long time and loved van life, and I saw it as a culture, as a lifestyle, and I've always been a nomad, and so moving into this vehicle dwelling lifestyle, I wanted to be a van lifer. I thought that was just the coolest thing ever, and it totally fit so much of who I am. So I identified with being a van lifer, and so when I moved into my car, I was a car lifer, and I accepted that. I loved everything about my car. I had put together all the components that I loved, so I was a car lifer. But what I was doing was surrounding myself with van lifers. I started going to van life meetups. I started to live as a van lifer, even though I was in my car, and I didn't know how long I was going to be a car lifer. And certainly I didn't think I was going to move into a van that fast. So that's what I did. I surrounded myself with van lifers and people of like mind, right? People who are like, there's tons of different cliques and all that in the van life community, but I kind of found my people. And then yeah, so I just traveled around. I remember my very first van life meetup. I think I have a video about it, but I showed up, drove in my little Ford Fiesta, and one of the people came over and said, hi, can I help you? And I said, oh, is this the van life meetup? And he's like, yeah. And I said, oh, I'm here. I talked to so-and-so, and they said it was fine to come in my car. And they just accepted me right out the gate. I felt accepted and supported and all that. And I just stayed in the van life community. It wasn't very long after that. And how I manifested my van was like, it just happened. I believe it's because I manifested this in this way, and so yeah, because I never felt that I was homeless or down and out, or even though some of my circumstances were really difficult, very challenging, financially, I just kept my view of myself, that of which I believe of myself. I'm a good person. I contribute, and I believe in who I am, and I will not fall into this. And I don't even let people, people will try to categorize you and all this kind of stuff. But for me, no, I know who I am, and I emanate that, and I keep that. And anytime I start to deviate from that and fall into like, I pull myself back out and say, this is who you are, this is how you're going to live, and this is how you're going to show up. And I do it. Yeah, so around supports, guys, I've made a lot of videos when I first started in my car life journey, a lot of how I did things, how I got around in my car, and different things that I needed. So I'll just talk on basic levels. I think this is regardless of whether you're in a van or a car or a boat or an RV. These are what I consider really, really, really essential, especially if you're a single woman. You're not you're on your own and you're doing this thing. So some of the major things are, you need protection. I haven't actually done a video about this specific subject, but I should, and I will, is personal protection. So I have a system here in my van, and I feel pretty safe with that. So it's just basic things like, I have bear spray, I have personal alarms, I have my vehicle has a panic button, so if I were to hit that, there's this crazy alarm system that goes off, and a few other things that I'll get into in another video. So yeah, you need to have some personal protection, and part of that, I believe, is you need to have window covers. And I say this because what I'm seeing is a lot more people living in vehicle, like a little car, and it's just like a fishbowl, like they don't have any protection or privacy. And so you don't have to do window covers, expensive. Just get stuff from the dollar store, even if it's just poster board, put something up. You need to cover your windows, but in a still stealthy way. I do see people put sheets up on their window, which is fine and all that, but it's just, for me, I think if you're a woman, a single woman, just do it as stealthily as you can. So window covers, right? And then, safe areas. I talk a lot about where I sleep, and just off the top is I sleep in a lot of BC Parks campgrounds. I feel totally safe there. I sleep in rest stops that I'm familiar with. in my local geography where there's people I know there's other when I say rest stops, and people have this visual of whatever it is in your area, and so maybe that's not safe, but here it is a safe thing for me. And there are a lot of little, like, not official rest stops, you know, little alcoves on the highway, or there's service roads and logging roads. Like where I am, there's quite a bit. I personally don't want to go too much out in remote for that reason. It just doesn't feel safe to me. And also too, I've done a lot more urban stealth camping, and I've come across quite a few people in, you know, so in a city where there are a lot of places, safe places to park, and you just have to follow the rules and the laws, and you know, and just stay under the radar is what I say, but follow the rules, follow the laws, and be discreet, arrive late, leave early, don't put garbage and all that. So urban stealth camping is a great option because you're safe. I think you're safe. And then also mail, right? So you're unhoused, but you still need a mailing address. Like, you just do. And so I've gone through a couple different things around that, but now I have a really great mailing address. It's like an actual mailing address. I pay for it and my mail goes there. It's snail mail, and it's what I use. Took me a little while to find that situation, but there's more and more popping up, because I don't recommend a P.O. box, right? I find for a lot of reasons, you can't even get a lot of things delivered, all that kind of stuff. So my number one top tip around mail is find an actual place where you can get an actual address. Okay guys, that felt good to just put this out there. Like I said, this is my entire life. This is what I deal with all the time. This is where I fall into the category of van dweller, vehicle dweller, van lifer, car lifer. This is my demographic, and I know on my channel the majority of my demographic are women in my age group, and not everybody's in my financial situation, right? And so that, yay that. So yeah, this is just to put out there more of who I am, what I'm dealing with, especially right now. And being unhoused, right, is the new normal. And and that's my reality. Okay guys, so like I said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching all of this, guys. I will see you in my next video. Take care.